Chapter 7. So, she wanted to be certain that we'd be wrecked if she was frustrated in her attempts in the engine room, Gretos said. You'd better continue the search for other microswitches or sabotage devices. Makul's face was long. We're ready to operate now, but hell, we can't spare any power now because we need all we can get to keep the temperature down. I can spare enough to cancel the tumble, but that's all. Forget it for now, Greta said. He had contacted Van Vorden, who seemed to have recovered. He confirmed the captain's theory about the rise in temperature. It was the rapid contraction of the ship that was causing the emission of heat. How is this contraction possible? Greta said. Are the atoms of the ship and of our bodies coming closer together? If so, what happens when they come into contact with each other?
We've already passed that point of diminishment,
Van Vorden said.
I'd say that our own atoms are shrinking also.
But that's not possible, Greta replied. Then, forget about that remark. What is possible? Whatever happens is possible. Greta cut him off and strode back and forth, and wished that he could smoke a cigar. He had intended to talk about what the Sleipnir would find if it had managed to break back into its native universe. It seemed to Greta that the universe would have changed so much that no one aboard the ship would recognize it. Every time the secondary, the universe, completed a revolution on its axis, trillions of Earth years, maybe quadrillions, may have passed. The Earth's sun may have become a lightless clot in space, or even have disappeared altogether. Man, who might have survived on other planets, would no longer be Homo sapiens. Moreover, when the Sleipnir attained a supercosmic mass on its way out of the universe, it may have disastrously affected the other masses in the universe. Yet, none of these events may have occurred. It was possible that time inside that sphere was absolutely independent of time outside it. The notion was not so fantastic. God almighty. Less than 70 minutes ago, Donna Wellington had been inside the ship. Now, the ship was inside her. And when the electrons and the nuclei of the atoms comprising the ship and the crew came into contact, what then? Explosions? Or were the elements made up of divisible sub-elements, and collapse would go on towards the inner infinity? He thought of the 20th century stories of a man shrinking until the molecules became clusters of suns and nuclei, where the suns and electrons were the planets. Eventually, the hero found himself on an electron planet with atmosphere, seas, rivers, plains, mountains, trees, animals, and aboriginal sentience. Atomic matter was composed of wavicles, stuff describable in terms of both waves and particles. The parahomunculus hero would be in a cosmos as bewildering as that encountered by the crew of the Sleipnir on breaking into the extra-universe space. That fantasy, galloping across the sky of his mind, swift as the original Sleipnir, eight-legged horse of All-Father Odin of his ancestors' religion, would have to be dismissed. Donna Wellington was not a female Ymir, the primeval giant out of whose slain corpse was formed the world, the skull, the sky, the blood, the sea, the flesh, the earth, the bones, the mountains. No. The heat contraction would increase until the men cooked in their suits. What happened after that would no longer be known to the crew, and hence of no consequence. Captain! Makul's face was on the auxiliary screen, kept open to the engine room. We'll be ready to go in a minute. Sweat mingled with tears to blur the image of the engineer's face. We'll make it then, Greta said. 4 minutes later, the tumble was stopped. The ship was pointed upwards and was on its way out. The temperature began dropping inside the ship at 16.7 degrees Celsius per 30 seconds. The blackness was relieved by a gray thread. The thread broadened into ribbon, and then the ribbon became the edges of two mountain ridges, one below and the one up above, hanging upside down. This time, Grettir said, we'll make a hole more than large enough. Van Voorden, much tranquilized by a pill, entered the bridge as the Sleipnir passed through the break. Grettir said, the hole repairs itself even more quickly than it did the last time. That's why the nose was cut off. We didn't know that the bigger the hole, the swifter the rate of reclosure. Van Voorden said,
3,600 billion years old, or even more. Why bother to go home when home no longer exists? Not that I particularly care now. Anyway, it'll all be very interesting.
Maybe there won't be that much time gone, Grettir said. Do you remember Minkowski's classical phrase? From henceforth, space in itself and time in itself sink to mere shadows, and only a kind of union of the two preserves an independent existence. That phrase applied to the world inside the sphere, our world. Perhaps out here, the union is somehow dissolved, the marriage of space and time is broken. Perhaps no time, or very little, has elapsed in our world.
It's possible,
Van Voorden said.
But you've overlooked one thing, Captain. If our world has not been marked by time while we've been gone, we have been marked, scarred by unspace and untime. I'll never believe in cause and effect and order throughout the cosmos again. I'll always be suspicious, anxious. I'm a ruined man.
Grettir started to answer, but could not make himself heard. The men and women on the bridge were weeping, sobbing, or laughing shrilly. Later, they would think of that out there as a nightmare, and would try not to think of it at all. And if other nightmares faced them here, at least they would be nightmares they knew.